Okay, let's start with a thought. What if some of the most fundamental ideas we associate with, the West,
Hmm.
things like rigorous scientific inquiry, rational thought, what if they didn't actually originate there?
Hmm.
What if they arrived from somewhere else, somewhere kind of unexpected?
It's a really provocative idea, isn't it? Because for centuries, Western Europe was struggling. Our source calls it a period of nightfall.
Right. Well, elsewhere, something very different was happening.
Exactly. A vibrant intellectual movement was absolutely flourishing.
And today, that's our deep dive. We're going to unpack how Arab learning during that exact period just profoundly transformed the intellectual landscape of Christian civilization.
And we'll look at some fascinating figures like Adelard of Bath, people who acted as these crucial bridges for knowledge.
Our guide for this journey is Jonathan Lyons' really comprehensive book, The House of Wisdom: How the Arabs Transformed Western Civilization.
And Lyons has this great framework. He frames this incredible transfer of knowledge through the symbolic journey of a day, like the 5 daily Muslim prayers.
And where are we in that day?
We're hitting al-Zuhr, midday, the absolute peak of this impact.
Okay, so prepare yourself to uncover an incredible story. It's about intellectual curiosity, cross-cultural exchange, and some, surprising facts that really sparked an awakening in the West. Let's jump in.
Right, so let's set the scene. Picture Western Europe, late 11th century. It was, let's just say it was pretty grim.
Grim how?
You have figures like Adelard of Bath, who we mentioned, an educated man, a country gentleman, and he felt, in his words, a deep disdain for what he called the stupid state of learning.
Stupid. That's harsh.
It sounds harsh, but look at the context. Europe was grappling with widespread violence, really primitive agricultural techniques, and just a severe lack of fundamental knowledge.
And we're not just talking complex philosophy here.
No. We're talking basics, like the concept of zero. Crucial tools like the astrolabe, papermaking, just not there.
It's genuinely hard to wrap your head around. Even in Europe's, top mathematical centers, that Cathedral School of Lyon you mentioned, no grasp of zero. Nothing.
Completely absent. It's astonishing. And think about daily life. Timekeeping, for example, was incredibly crude.
How crude are we talking?
Well, they might use a 12-inch wax candle to mark 4 hours, or rely on psalms sung by a dedicated monk, the significator horarum. It hampered everything: social organization, scientific development.
This basic planning must have been a nightmare.
Absolutely. And part of this was down to a massive loss of classical knowledge.
How did that happen?
You had Germanic invasions earlier on, and later Muslim conquests effectively cut off access to Byzantine centers of learning. Formal education just collapsed in many places.
So Greek texts, Aristotle, Plato.
Lost or simply unintelligible.
Yeah.
Centuries of accumulated knowledge just vanished from Latin-speaking Europe.
Wow. And what about the church's role in all this? Did it help or hinder?
It's complex, but the prevailing Christian worldview at the time, heavily influenced by figures like Augustine and Isidore of Seville, it often discouraged scientific inquiry.
Discouraged how? Actively suppressed it?
Sometimes, yeah. Curiosity itself could be viewed negatively, even as a soul-damning disease. Natural phenomena were often interpreted allegorically as moral lessons, not as things to be studied scientifically.
So, an eclipse wasn't an astronomical event, it was a sign.
Exactly. Science was sometimes even condemned as black magic. This created what Lyons calls an unbridgeable distinction between heaven and earth, and sort of asserted that humanity couldn't really grasp the universe rationally.
And didn't Isidore of Seville have some strange ideas about the earth itself?
Oh yes. His assertion, widely accepted, that the earth was flat and resembled a wheel, apparently based on a mistranslation, flew in the face of the spherical view known to the ancient Greeks and, crucially, to the Arabs.
So those TO maps you see with Jerusalem in the middle?
Those were common, yeah. They represented a theological geography, not a physical one. And this lack of understanding of natural laws, it contributed to a climate of fear.
Fear and hysteria.
Think about the responses to the Black Death later on. Accusations against Jewish communities, the flagellant movements. A lack of rational explanation often led to irrational reactions.
Okay, so it's a pretty bleak picture. But even in this nightfall, there were some flickers, right? Some early, maybe tentative encounters with Arab ideas.
There were. Often misunderstood, sometimes feared, but yes. Take Gerber Doriak,
who later became Pope Sylvester II.
That's one. Around 967, he studied in Catalonia, right on the border with Muslim Spain. He encountered early forms of Arabic numerals, the astrolabe.
And he tried to promote this knowledge.
He did. He championed the quadrivium maths, astronomy, music, geometry, and even challenged the flat Earth idea, which was bold.
But it didn't exactly catch on.
Not easily. His efforts were sometimes dismissed as Saracen magic. And get this, his own students apparently struggled with basic geometric concepts, like figuring out the interior angle of a triangle.
Wow. Just shows how far things had slipped.
It really does. Then there was Walter of Malvern, an English cleric, a bit later, around 1092.
What did he do?
He conducted what seems to be the first known Western experiment, using an astrolabe to try and improve astronomical predictions. A tiny step, maybe, but it shows a budding empirical approach.
So moving away from just pure interpretation.
Exactly. He adopted Arab methods for recording data degrees, minutes, seconds. Much more accurate than the old Roman fractions. But even so, his tables were still, well, Lyons calls them grossly inadequate. Still, it was a start.
Okay, so that's the scene in Europe. Intellectual nightfall, very limited knowledge, some tentative steps. Now let's pivot.
Right, let's look at the contrast, the dawn of Arab learning.
This great age centered around places like Baghdad and the legendary House of Wisdom.
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? While Europe was in the dark, the Arab world was experiencing this incredible intellectual flourishing. It was, frankly, a scientific and technological superpower.
Tell us about Baghdad.
Founded around 765, it quickly became this incredibly prosperous hub trade, commerce, ideas, all built meticulously on Euclidean geometric lines, interestingly enough.
And its growth was fueled by?
Economic power, imperial reach. But crucially, they adopted papermaking.
From China, right?
Yes, a Chinese invention. The Arabs adopted and perfected it. Baghdad paper became famous, so much so that some Byzantine sources just called all paper Bagdetixin.
And paper changes everything for knowledge, doesn't it?
Completely. It revolutionized book production. Suddenly, you could have vast libraries. This led to what Lyons calls a profound culture of the book.
Meaning?
Bazaars filled with booksellers, specialized copy shops, huge public and private libraries. Al-Aziz reportedly had 40 rooms filled with books. The Al-Muzdin Syria Madrasa, a university, had something like 80,000 volumes.
80,000. That's unimaginable compared to Europe at the time.
It really is. And it wasn't just collecting. Caliphs like Al-Mansur and especially Al-Mamun actively promoted scholarship.
Oh.
They commissioned translations on a massive scale. Hindu texts, Persian, and critically Greek classics, Plato, Aristotle, the medical texts of Hippocrates and Galen, Euclid's geometry, Ptolemy's Almagest.
The foundational texts of Western thought being preserved and studied in Arabic.
Exactly. Arabic actually replaced Greek as the universal language of science for centuries. Scholars traveled huge distances to be part of this.
Was there a religious dimension to this encouragement of learning?
Very much so, especially in early Islam. There was an open encouragement of intellectual inquiry. You have sayings attributed to the Prophet Muhammad like, seek for science even in China, or that scholars are heirs to the prophets.
So learning wasn't seen as conflicting with faith.
But quite the opposite initially. And practical religious needs also drove innovation. Think about the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca.
How did that contribute?
Well, it naturally created this incredible annual global marketplace of ideas. People from all over the Muslim world came together, sharing knowledge, innovations, books.
And didn't the need to pray towards Mecca play a role too? The Qibla.
A huge role. Determining the precise direction of prayer, the Qibla, towards Mecca, from anywhere in the world. That required sophisticated astronomy and mathematics.
Ah, so a practical religious requirement drove scientific advancement.
Precisely. It led to advanced methods for calculating Mecca's location, predicting moon sightings for the calendar, developing incredibly precise timekeeping, while Walter, back in England, was making baby steps with his astrolabe.
Arab scholars were working on a whole different level.
Miles ahead, calculating things accurately down to seconds of arc, using advanced trigonometry. It was a different world.
Which brings us back to Adelard of Bath. He stands at this crossroads, doesn't he?
He really does. And he makes a very different choice from many of his contemporaries.
Meaning the Crusaders.
Exactly. The Crusades were happening. And as Lyons points out, the Arab perception of the Crusaders wasn't exactly flattering. They saw them as, well, warlike, filthy, and inclined toward treachery, largely due to their sort of primitive ways compared to Arab society at the time.
But Adelard wasn't interested in fighting.
No. He was determined to learn from Muslims, not conquer them. He explicitly said he was seeking the light of Arab wisdom.
So he sets off.
At 1109, yes. Convinced that Arab knowledge was the remedy for the West's failings, he leaves England to pursue the Studia Arabum, the learning of the Arabs in the East.
Where did he go?
The exact route isn't crystal clear. He probably went via Sicily, which was a former Muslim territory and still had strong Arab cultural influence. Then he headed east.
And he left his students behind.
He did, entrusted them to that school at Lyons we mentioned, rather amusingly mocking the insecurity of French opinions as he left.
Huh. So where did he end up?
He arrived in Antioch, a major crusader principality, yes, but also a vital trade hub. And he was, in his words, amazed by the Arab knowledge he found there.
Antioch was a key place for this exchange then.
Absolutely. It was becoming a really important center for translating Arabic texts into Latin, especially, interestingly, in advanced Muslim medicine.
And traders were involved too.
Big time. Italian traders, especially from Pisa, were crucial in moving not just goods, but Arab wisdom westward. The markets in places like Antioch were apparently filled with Arabic books, some captured in warfare, others traded.
And wasn't there another scholar there around the same time? Stephen of Pisa.
Yes, good point. Stephen of Pisa also came to Antioch, specifically to learn. Around 1127, he translated a massive medical encyclopedia, the Royal Book, by Ali ibn al-Abbas al-Majusi. It became a standard medical text in Europe for centuries.
So Adelard is soaking all this in. How long was he there?
He spent about 7 years in the Crusader lands, primarily Syria and possibly Palestine. And during that time, he developed considerable facility with Arabic.
And it changed him.
Profoundly. Lyons describes it as a profound transformation in his worldview. He essentially abandoned all that he thought he knew.
Wow.
He embraced this new, rational, experimental approach to understanding the world, and he explicitly credited his Arab masters for it.
So he comes back to England, a different person.
A completely new man, only to find his homeland, as he rather cynically put it, filled with barbarous princes, drunken bishops, and bribable judges.
Ouch, quite the reality check.
You can imagine, and this transformation comes out in his work, especially questions on natural science.
How so?
He writes it as a dialogue with his nephew. He basically acts as a spokesperson for these new Arab ideas, answering his nephew's questions about everything from, quote, the lowest objects and ending with the highest.
Giving rational explanations for things?
Exactly. Explaining natural phenomena through reason, not just allegory. But he was clever about it.
Oh.
He often attributed the more potentially controversial ideas to the Arabs, saying the Arabs teach this, or according to the Arabs. It was a way to introduce these radical concepts while giving himself a bit of cover from potential criticism from the church or traditional authorities.
Smart move. Okay, so let's unpack these intellectual trophies he brought back. What exactly were they, and why were they so revolutionary for Europe?
Right, these weren't just curiosities, they were foundational. First, maybe most importantly, Euclidean geometry.
Euclid's Elements.
Precisely. Before Adelard's translation, starting around 1126, Europe had incredibly limited access to it. Maybe just the first few propositions, often garbled. Adelard brought back a much more complete version.
And why was that such a big deal? It's just shapes, right?
But it's so much more. It wasn't just about geometry, it was about proof. Rigorous logical deduction. A whole new way of thinking based on axioms and theorems.
A structured way to arrive at truth.
Exactly. And this proved absolutely crucial for later advancements in medieval astronomy. It also had a huge influence on architecture.
Architecture. How?
Think Gothic cathedrals. That soaring sense of space, the complex vaulting, the introduction of the pointed arch, which allows for greater height and stability, is often linked to the influx of this new geometric understanding, this geometry of the Arabs.
So the very shape of European buildings changed.
You could argue that, yeah. Master builders, the masons, explicitly adopted this knowledge. They even referred to worthy clerk Euclid as their guide. And Adelard's work heavily influenced later thinkers focused on observation and mathematics, like Roger Bacon.
Okay, so geometry was huge. What else?
Astronomical tables. The Arabs called them Z. Adelard translated a very important, though by then slightly dated, set by Al-Khwarizmi, the same scholar who gave us algebra and algorithm.
Al-Khwarizmi's Zay al-Sintin.
That's the one, translated around 1126. Even though Arab astronomers had already improved upon it for Europe, this was revolutionary. It was their first comprehensive exposure to proper mathematical astronomy.
What did that mean practically?
It changed how they understood the movement of the planets, how they calculated calendars, predicted eclipses. It stimulated huge amounts of scholarly activity, and they even had to invent new Latin words to deal with the concepts involved.
Just understanding it was a challenge.
A massive one. And connected to this, of course, was the astrolabe.
The instrument itself.
Yes, but also the knowledge behind it. Abelard wrote a treatise on the use of the astrolabe around 1149 or 1150. This wasn't just a how-to manual.
What was it then?
Lyons argues it presented the Latin West with the beginnings of a coherent and comprehensive cosmology, a model of the universe.
That's directly challenged.
Isidore of Seville's flat, wheel-like Earth. The astrolabe, based on a spherical Earth and sophisticated geometry, fundamentally contradicted that old view.
So it wasn't just a tool, it was a worldview changer.
Exactly. Abelard saw the astrolabe as more than just brass and pointers. It was a symbol for a fresh way to view the world. The idea that humanity could measure the cosmos, understand it rationally, that the universe was a measurable and analyzable entity.
That sounds like the birth of empirical science.
It's certainly a massive step towards it, paving the way for organized societies based on predictable time and seasons, and for science based on observation and calculation.
Okay, geometry, astronomy, the astrolabe.
Yeah.
Anything else in his toolkit?
Astrology was also significant. He translated a work by Alcubazar, the abbreviation of the Introduction to Astrology, around 1120.
Astrology, we think of that differently today.
We do, but back then, astronomy and astrology were very closely linked. This translation established Alcubazar as the leading authority on astrological science in the West for centuries. And, importantly,
yes,
it served as an early vehicle for introducing Aristotle's natural philosophy to the Latin world. Alcubazar's work explicitly linked what they called magic to other sciences and stressed that to practice it properly, you had to master astronomy and astrology first.
This would kind of legitimized a broader scientific inquiry.
In a way, yes. It framed these pursuits together, and finally there was alchemy.
Turning lead into gold.
That's the popular image, but Arab alchemy was much more practical, really. Abelard showed interest, possibly translating a text called A Little Key to Drawing. It suggests his engagement with practical industrial techniques. Things like tinting glass, different colors, coloring leather. Alchemy in the Arab world was a serious incubator of early experimental science. They perfected techniques like distillation, crystallization, other chemical processes.
It was early chemistry, basically.
A lot of it was, yes. And when this knowledge arrived in Latin Europe, it spurred centuries of chemical research.
Yeah.
It wasn't all theoretical either. Some princes hired alchemists hoping to, boost their treasuries.
Which probably didn't please the church.
Not always. Pope John XII, for instance, condemned the practice. But the practical knowledge was undeniably valuable.
So Abelard and others like him, they bring back these incredible discoveries. Geometry, astronomy, the astrolabe, astrology, alchemy. What was the immediate effect?
You could almost call it an intellectual gold rush, as Lyons puts it. Abelard wasn't alone for long. His efforts, combined with the translations happening elsewhere, particularly in Spain and Sicily.
It sent scholars flocking to these places.
Exactly. Off they went to Toledo, Palermo, Antioch. Anywhere they could get their hands on these Arabic texts. They were hungry for this knowledge.
And this influx, this gold rush, it genuinely transformed the West.
Lyons argues forcefully that, yes, it transformed the backward West into a scientific and technological superpower. It opened Europe's eyes to a completely new way of understanding the world, reintroduced lost arts like accurate timekeeping, and provided the mathematical and logical tools needed for future progress.
But it wasn't just what they learned, was it? You mentioned Abelard's emphasis on a new approach to knowledge.
That's absolutely key. Perhaps even more revolutionary than the specific texts was Abelard's insistence on reason, on experimentation, on trusting personal experience over just blindly accepting authority.
Even established religious authority.
He walked a careful line, but yes, he famously argued with his nephew in his questions, saying, I learned one thing from my Arab masters, you something else. You follow authority, but I follow reason. And crucially, he asserted that seeking knowledge of the natural world wasn't in conflict with belief in God.
That sounds very modern, almost like Galileo centuries later.
It really does. He argued for this compatibility centuries before Galileo faced the Inquisition for similar ideas.
Yeah.
This fostered, over time, a kind of truce between faith and reason in Western thought, heavily influenced by Arab Aristotelian philosophers.
But this new logic, this emphasis on reason and Arab sources, it must have ruffled some feathers. Was it seen as dangerous?
Oh, absolutely. There was significant pushback. Take Michael Scott, a fascinating figure from the early 13th century.
What about him?
He just devoured Muslim learning whole, as Lyons says. He became the West's first real expert on Aristotle, translating cornerstone works like On Animals, On the Heavens, On the Soul, directly from Arabic versions, often with commentaries by Arab scholars like Averroes.
And how was he received?
He gained immense fame, worked for Emperor Frederick II, but he was also widely branded a wizard, a magician, precisely because of his deep association with this pagan and Arab learning.
A wizard. And wasn't he connected to Fibonacci?
Yes. Michael Scott actually mentored Leonardo of Pisa, who we know as Fibonacci.
The sequence guy.
The very same. But his bigger contribution was arguably his book, The Book of Calculation, from 1202.
What was in it?
Based on what he learned from Muslim traders in North Africa, Fibonacci introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals to Christian Europe.
You mean 1, 2, 3, and 0?
Exactly. What he called the 9 Indian figures, plus the sign 0, which the Arabs call Zephyr. He also introduced algebra, and he explicitly credited the Arabs for these methods. Think how that revolutionized trade, finance, science, everything.
It's hard to overstate that. And Michael Scott also worked for Emperor Frederick II, the baptized sultan.
That's right. Frederick II was really unique among European rulers of his time. Grandson of Raja II of Sicily, who also fostered a multicultural court. Frederick grounded his worldview in reason.
How did that manifest?
Well, for instance, he famously abolished trial by ordeal, throwing people in water to see if they float, because it simply wasn't justifiable by reason. He loved Muslim learning, corresponded with Arab scholars, patronized Michael Scott. His motto essentially was to present things that are as they are, a real empirical streak.
But the establishment, particularly the church and the universities, weren't always on board with this rationalist wave.
Definitely not. The University of Paris, which was the leading theological center in the West, got very nervous. They issued official condemnations in 1210, 1270, and again in 1277.
Condemnations of what?
Banning the teaching of Aristotle's natural philosophy, his physics, his metaphysics, and especially the commentaries on Aristotle by Arab philosophers like Averroes.
What were the specific sticking points?
Some really incendiary doctrines from their perspective. Chief among them was the idea of the eternity of the world, mostly associated with Averroes, and also ideas suggesting God's indifference to individual human affairs, or limits on God's power based on natural laws.
The eternity of the world. What was so radical about that?
Well, the traditional Christian, Jewish, and Muslim view was creation ex nihilo. God created the world out of nothing at a specific point in time. Averroes, following Aristotle, argued the world was eternal, that it had always existed alongside God.
Which removes the moment of creation.
Exactly. It implies a universe governed by immutable natural laws, perhaps limiting God's direct intervention. Averroes saw philosophy as a demonstrative science capable of reaching absolute truth, potentially independent of or even equal to revealed religious truth.
That sounds incredibly modern, almost like Descartes centuries later.
Lyons calls it a thoroughly rationalist approach. It put Averroes way ahead of his time and made him a constant source of theological debate and anxiety in both the Christian West and sometimes the Islamic world, too. He was actually banished for a time in Muslim Spain, his books burned, largely due to political pressures related to these controversial ideas.
So this whole influx of Arab science and philosophy, particularly Aristotelianism via figures like Averroes, it really did set the stage for later developments.
Absolutely. You can draw a direct line, especially in astronomy. Remember how Arab scholars were already refining Ptolemy's model?
Right, they weren't happy with things like the equant point.
Precisely. From the 11th century onward, scientists in the Arab tradition successors to the House of Wisdom, working in places like the Moraga Observatory in Persia, funded by Hulagu Khan.
They were systematically critiquing Ptolemy's Almagest?
Yes, they saw theoretical flaws, particularly the equant, because it violated the philosophical principle of uniform circular motion for celestial bodies. It just seemed messy, mathematically and philosophically.
So they tried to fix it.
They developed sophisticated mathematical models to get rid of the equant, to make all the planets revolve with uniform motion around circles, which in turn revolved around other circles, all centered ultimately on the Earth.
Key figures here were
astronomers like Ibn al-Shatir in Damascus and Nasir al-Din al-Tusi at Moraga. They produce these incredibly complex but mathematically coherent geocentric models.
And how does this connect to Copernicus?
Well, the mathematical devices they developed, particularly the Tusi couple, which converts linear motion from circular motions. These turned up later in Copernicus's work. It seems highly likely Copernicus was aware of these later Arab models, perhaps through Byzantine or Italian connections.
So he didn't have to invent the mathematical fixes from scratch.
Exactly. The groundwork of critiquing Ptolemy and developing alternative mathematical machinery had already been done over centuries by Arab astronomers. Copernicus's great conceptual leap was taking that machinery and realizing it worked even better if you shifted the center point for the Earth to the Sun.
Making the heliocentric revolution much more achievable.
Much more. He was standing on the shoulders of giants, and many of those giants were Arab scientists whose names are sadly often forgotten in the standard story of the scientific revolution.
Wow. Okay, so let's bring this all together. You've taken us on this incredible journey through an intellectual exchange that really did transform Western Europe.
From that period of nightfall
To what Lyons calls the afternoon of reason. And much of that transformation, it seems, was thanks to these bridge builders like Abelard, who chose to seek wisdom from the Arab world instead of just conflict.
It's a powerful narrative shift, and it highlights something important. The names of these Arab intellectual giants, Al-Khwarizmi, Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Al-Idrisi, Averroes, Ibn Rushd.
Names that dominated European thought for centuries.
Absolutely dominated. They were the authorities in medicine, mathematics, philosophy, geography. Yet today, as Lyons points out, these names often evoke little response in the West.
Despite their contributions being woven into the very fabric of Western civilization.
Deeply woven.
It makes you think about that quote from Jonathan Lyons you mentioned earlier.
We taste the spices of Arabia, yet never feel the scorching sun which brings them forth.
We've definitely felt some of that scorching sun today. So the final thought for you, our listener, is this. What does it mean for us now to really recognize how much of our own Western scientific and rational heritage has these deep, vibrant roots in other traditions?
And perhaps more importantly, what new insights, what new discoveries might be waiting for us if we make a conscious effort to look beyond the conventional narratives and acknowledge these crucial cross-cultural connections?